Mr. President, I come today to talk about a regulatory issue, and it would be easy to joke about it, and I will probably not be able to resist a few puns along the way, but it is very serious. The Food and Drug Administration is reviewing food labels. They want to make them more understandable. They want to make them more informative to people when they're purchasing food in the grocery store. They've increased the font size on the calorie, serving size, number of servings in a container. This all makes sense. But there is a place where the proposed rule of the FDA goes off the rails, if you will, and that involves maple syrup and honey, which the agency is suggesting should have on its label added sugar. Well, maple syrup and honey essentially are sugar. And in pure maple syrup and pure honey, which we produce in our state and in other states in the northern tier, nothing's added. And to add the phrase added sugar to maple syrup and maple sugar makes no sense and is indeed confusing to the consumer. Because if you read a label and it's maple syrup and it says added sugar, your natural assumption is somebody's put some more sugar in there. That's what you would take from that. And indeed, that's what this label requirement, which has been proposed, would do, and it would actually undermine the good work that's been done by the maple syrup industry and the honey industry, honey business over the years to explain to consumers the difference between pure honey and pure maple sugar, pure maple syrup, and other products which have other things in them and may have sugar added. This is a maple. This is where maple syrup comes from. This is a maple tree. The farmer is tapping it. These tubes all lead to a maple house. Making maple syrup is not easy. It takes 40 gallons of sap to make 1 gallon of syrup. That's why we call it liquid gold. It's a wonderful product. It's a pure product, and there's nothing that's added between the tree and the jar that you buy in your grocery store, if indeed it is real maple syrup. Nothing is added. Last week, I visited a wonderful guy in Maine who's known as the bee whisperer. And he, or rather his bees, make honey. And we were out in his back field where the hives are. I said, "How many bees are out there?" He looked at it and sort of scratched his head. He said, "About 3 million. Bees are in the hives in this backyard, back field of the honey whisperer up in Maine, the bee whisperer rather. And then the honey comes in the combs. They scrape the wax off the top. The wax is created by the bees, by the way. This is a totally natural product. The honey comes out, and here it is coming out into a jar. This is pure honey. To add to this label, sugar added, makes no sense, because it's not. Nothing's added, except what the bees produce. So this is a case where I think what we're talking about is a well-meaning attempt on the part of this agency, the FDA, to inform consumers, but in the process, what they're really doing is misinforming them. Honey comes from the bee to the jar, nothing in between. Maple syrup comes from the tree to the jar, nothing in between. Nothing is added. The only thing that's added by this proposed regulation is confusion. And confusion is the whole thing we're trying to avoid here. We're not adding sugar. Sugar isn't added to maple syrup and to honey. If you put added sugar on the label, it will make the consumer think this isn't a pure product, and it will undo 50 years of effort to make the public understand the difference between a pure maple syrup and pure honey and something that may indeed have some added ingredients. Marianne Kenny, and by the way, Marianne's husband is the guy that was tapping the tree that I showed a minute ago. She's a state legislator in Maine, and she's also a maple producer. And she's in Washington this week spreading the word about this issue. And I just want to add my voice to it because this would have a significant impact on these industries nationwide. And these are important businesses. In Maine, maple syrup is a $20 million a year business. Now, I have to admit that one day, years ago, when I was the governor of Maine, we used to tap a maple tree in the front yard of the governor's residence every year. And so it was a ceremonial event. The press was there, and I went out one year to tap that tree, nail one of these guys into the tree, and then the sap drips out into the bucket, and the bucket is then, this is the old-fashioned way. The new way is what I showed before, where the tubes run right to the sugar house. And the press was there, and they said, "Governor, what do you think of Vermont maple syrup?" I said, "Vermont maple syrup? Are you kidding? We use that in cars in Maine. We don't eat that stuff." Well, it started a war with the governor of Vermont, which we settled amicably, I might add. But maple syrup is important to us. And I think this is, it would be a funny issue. In fact, most people, when you say they're going to put added sugar on a label for maple syrup, they think it's kind of funny. It's not funny to the industry. So I can't resist, Mr. President. I'm hoping for a sweet ending to a sticky mess, and that the FDA this week will do the right thing. Thank you, Mr. President. I yield the floor.